Poor delivery boy changed a billionaire's life. The rain hammered against the cracked pavement the night 19-year-old Rafael Ibarra collapsed outside a mansion gate, his bicycle wheel bent beyond repair, 3 unfinished deliveries still strapped to his back, and a stranger's life about to change forever because of what he did next. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of hope and wisdom, hit like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little faith today, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps this story reach more hearts. Rafael had been riding for 6 hours straight. His family's small apartment on the edge of the city hadn't had steady electricity in weeks, his mother's medication was overdue, and his little sister needed new shoes for school. Every delivery fee mattered. That night, exhausted and soaked to the bone, he was rushing to complete his last order when his bicycle skidded on the wet road and threw him hard onto the curb outside a towering iron gate. Pain shot through his ankle. The food containers spilled across the ground, ruined. He knew he'd have to pay for the order out of his own pocket, money he didn't have. As he knelt there in the downpour, trying to gather the mess with trembling hands, a security camera above the gate turned, and moments later, an elderly voice crackled through a small speaker asking if he was all right. Rafael, embarrassed and afraid of being blamed for trespassing, tried to explain himself quickly, apologizing for the noise, promising to leave right away. But the gate slowly creaked open instead. Inside stood an old man in a wheelchair, wrapped in a wool blanket, his eyes sharp despite his frail body. This was Augustine Cole, one of the wealthiest men in the country, a name Rafael had only ever seen on business magazines sold at newsstands. Augustine had built an empire in shipping and logistics, but in recent years, illness had confined him to this enormous, silent house, surrounded by staff who worked for him but never truly saw him. Augustine studied the soaked, injured boy for a long moment, then did something none of his own family had done in months. He asked Rafael if he was hungry. Rafael, startled, shook his head out of pride, insisting he was fine, that he simply needed to finish his route. But Augustine, sensing the exhaustion behind the boy's forced smile, insisted he come inside just to dry off and rest for 10 minutes. Reluctantly, Rafael agreed. Inside the grand house, Rafael felt like an intruder among marble floors and oil paintings, but Augustine's eyes lingered on him with unexpected warmth. As a housekeeper brought tea, Augustine asked about his life, his family, his ankle. Rafael, unused to anyone caring, found himself talking honestly for the first time in a long while, about his mother's illness, his father who had passed 3 years earlier, and his dream of one day studying engineering, a dream that felt impossibly far away. Augustine listened without interrupting, something rare in his world of business meetings and quarterly reports. When Rafael finally stood to leave, worried about his other deliveries, Augustine quietly asked his driver to take him home instead, along with a small envelope of money to cover the spilled order and his medical costs. Rafael tried to refuse, but Augustine simply said that kindness wasn't a loan to be repaid, only a seed to be planted forward. Weeks passed, and Rafael assumed that strange rainy night was simply a stroke of luck he'd never see again. But Augustine could not stop thinking about the boy's quiet resilience, his lack of self-pity, and the spark of ambition buried beneath his exhaustion. Augustine had spent decades building wealth, yet he realized, sitting alone in his enormous house with children who rarely visited and executives who only wanted his signature, that he had forgotten what real connection felt like. Rafael had reminded him of himself at that age, hungry, determined, and invisible to the world. One afternoon, Augustine's car arrived outside Rafael's apartment complex, drawing curious stares from neighbors. Augustine, with great effort, stepped out with his cane and asked to speak with Rafael's mother. He offered to cover her medical treatment fully and, more importantly, offered Rafael a sponsored place in a technical university, along with a part-time position at his company to support his family while he studied. Rafael stood frozen, overwhelmed, unable to speak, his mother weeping quietly beside him. Over the following months, Rafael's life transformed in ways he never dared to imagine. He excelled in his studies, driven by a hunger not just for success, but for the chance to prove that Augustine's faith in him meant something. He visited the old man often, not out of obligation, but because their conversations had become a genuine friendship, one built on mutual respect rather than money. Augustine, in turn, grew brighter, more engaged with life, often telling his staff that the boy on the bicycle had given him back a purpose he thought he'd lost forever. Years later, Rafael would graduate at the top of his class, eventually stepping into a leadership role within Augustine's company, not handed to him out of charity, but earned through relentless work and integrity. Augustine, watching from his wheelchair at the graduation ceremony, wept openly for the first time in years, telling everyone nearby that this young man had done more for him than any fortune ever could. If this story touched your heart even a little, please consider engaging with this video. It truly means the world and helps this story reach someone who might need hope today. And before we reach the end, if you've made it this far, drop a comment below with the word hope. Let's see how many kind hearts are watching this together. Rafael never forgot where he came from. Every rainy season, he personally visits families struggling on the streets he once rode, quietly leaving behind more than just money. He leaves behind belief, the same belief a dying old man once gave a soaked, broken delivery boy outside an iron gate, proving that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can rewrite two lives forever.